It wasn't long ago that I found myself on the cover of Forbes magazine. It was titled, Michael Garcia, World's Youngest Self-Made Billionaire. By the time I woke up, it opened my eyes and made me realize my true dream. I've always wanted to be a K-word. We have all heard of that word. When we hear it, some of us cringe, some of us get inspired, or some of us simply don't care. Regardless, I've always wanted to be that word. A Kardashian. Clearly, I have the looks, the bod, and the lips. I mean, come on. Yet, when telling my mom about my dreams, she made me realize that I don't have that one thing, the money. Money has become the fundamental way by which we define success today. By hurtful truth and reality over time, I've realized that becoming a quote-unquote Kardashian is more than being supported by big corporations or coming from a family of pre-existing wealth. It's a deeper issue. The matter pertains to the idea that our children are fighting for a seat at the table only to have their echoes be heard as whispers. The concept of climbing higher on the social ladder only applies to those who even have a chance to be exposed to the resources needed to shift economically. Inequities in education, resource distribution, and quality of life are increasing not just throughout the country, but right here in our hometowns, and that leads to my very concern. There's an astounding amount of individuals who marginalize the most vulnerable and powerless citizens of our global village. What does this mean, though? Well, according to the American Psychological Association, children from low socioeconomic status families are less likely to have experiences that encourage the development of fundamental skills such as reading, writing, or communication. We are expected to thrive, but the most basic and fundamental needs are not being met for some of our neighbors, friends, and family. This implies that instead of uniting together, some of us are slowly disconnecting in a world full of connection. So, before telling you about the Kardashians' cosmetic surgeries, their workouts, or their powerful influence in pop culture, let's explore under all those lip injections why people are unable to cross the bridge from instability to success, fill our minds, not our lips, with an understanding of how resources differ between social classes, and lastly, examine how all of this adds up and only pushes those struggling into a more tenuous situation that disconnects them from several portions of our society. Let me ask you a question. What is the first thing that comes to mind when I mention the word privilege? In most cases, people associate privilege with racial advantages. It wasn't too long ago that my great sister Kim Kardashian was facing some heat for embracing African American boxer braids. According to Africana feminism, she was scolded for embodying African beauty aesthetics while never actually living the burden that many Black women carry today. As a result, the idea of racial privilegeness has surfaced. While this ideology is completely acceptable for the society we live in today, I would like to focus the conversation towards another type of privilege that has gone unexamined, yet has determined the path for some of our most influential predecessors: socioeconomic privilege. This form of entitlement encompasses not just income, but also educational achievement and subjective perceptions of status and class. For example, take my beloved Kylie Jenner, a sister of the Kardashians. She recently earned the title of the world's youngest self-made billionaire. While some may disagree that her title is everything but self-made, critics claim that this path was expected for Kylie. Just take a look at her background. She has lived a sheltered life with the luxury of attaining almost anything. Because of this, she was able to climb even higher on the social ladder to expand her wealth dynasty. It's no secret that socioeconomic status plays a big role in the world we live in today. In fact, it even shapes the culture embedded within our society. Let's take a study done by the Columbia University School of Social Work, which identified low-income socio-demographic characteristics and associated it with stigma by the experimenters being tested on. The study found that many children are offered free or reduced meals through their schools, but due to stigma, they deny the assistance despite the obvious financial benefit and nutritional need. Because they are judged quietly or quite vocally for needing assistance, they shy from it, and our hungriest children grow hungrier. When people judge those trying desperately to meet those basic needs, it only results in the poor becoming poor. With Kim Kardashian having over 150 million Instagram followers, it's no secret that social media has become vital to her connection with the world. And by the way, she has nothing on my 692 Instagram followers. In all seriousness though, social media has become a powerhouse for communication. With accessibility to the internet sounding so versatile, there is actually a digital divide growing, which refers to a gap between demographics, usually rich versus poor, which translates into educated versus uneducated. The divide has detrimental consequences when it comes to education. For children who come from backgrounds where their communities are classified as low socioeconomic, their schools are usually unable to provide them with adequate resources to technology, which can hinder students from skills that eventually hold them back from being able to contribute to the workforce and other aspects of life. Undoubtedly, according to the 2012 Pew report Digital Differences, only 62% of those living in households making less than $30,000 a year use the internet, while 90% of those living in households making $50,000 to $75,000 use the internet. Inequitable access to electronic devices and effective internet connections contribute to opportunity, achievement, and equity gaps in education. While discussing equity gaps, let's take a closer look at what exactly equity refers to and what makes it different from equality. In terms of equality, students from opposing school districts would receive the same resources. However, according to the term equity, poorer students who require more resources in order to succeed would receive those additional resources. Despite this being known to lawmakers and school board members, we are seeing a negative shift between students from poor and richer communities. Why is it that despite the existence of the Every Student Succeeds Act, which fortifies the promise to close the achievement gap in race and background, that there are still cases where states are not properly funding school districts? In fact, in New York, the Alliance for Quality Education has led a massive litigation effort to compel the state to redistribute funds to ensure equitable funding for students in poor schools. This means that the problem has gotten so bad that legal organizations are beginning processes to hold states accountable. If you don't know anything about Keeping Up with the Kardashians season 15, let me catch you up real quick. Kourtney, the oldest sister of the Kardashian clan, basically finds herself a new therapist, and her sisters are convinced that she is brainwashed because she begins feeling disconnected with the world she's always been exposed to. Similarly, students today find themselves feeling the exact same emotions felt by Kourtney. Isolated, disconnected, secluded. By understanding the stigma around assistance, it becomes clear why we are seeing a higher percentage of failing students in our schools. Whether it's denying financial assistance for school meals, tutoring, or not adequately providing students with the necessary resources, we can see why our society is digging itself in a hole that continuously reduces the opportunity to be successful. In fact, according to the Coleman Report, a report highlighting the impact on students due to quality of education concluded that a school's social background has everything to do with student achievement. In fact, the study found that children who come from backgrounds where their communities are classified as low socioeconomic develop less skills, and students who come from backgrounds where their communities are classified as upper or higher socioeconomic status enjoy better educational outcomes. Clearly, we can see why our students are either dropping out of school or no longer pursuing an education after high school. We are creating this fallacy that their education isn't important because the student 2 blocks down the road on the other side of the district line deserves a better life because his parents could afford the luxury of that home. Just think about that and let it sink in. I can now see why being Kardashian wasn't a good dream to shoot for. Although I could have settled for taking selfies and being photogenic as my full-time job. On the topic of taking selfies, let's take a real quick one on the count of 3. Ready? Ready? One, two, three. With the utmost sincerity, though, I can now see why being Kardashian wasn't a good dream to shoot for. With the utmost sincerity, we all need adequate access to education, adequate resources, and a better quality of life. In the truthful words of Meredith Jones, one of the most fascinating things the Kardashians do is blur public and private. We never know what's being performed and what is real. Perhaps a better goal of mine would be to be a real person of substance, a person who leads others to follow the golden rule of life. Treat others as you would want to be treated. So I still like the sound of a K word. Rather than receiving kudos for being Kardashian, work with me to give kudos for being kind. Thank you.